The first time I saw the cracks in my marriage, I ignored them. Thought I was being paranoid. Thought I was overreacting. Because Jessica, my wife, my perfect, untouchable, larger-than-life Jessica, had a way of making me feel like everything was fine, even when it wasn't. She could spin a story so effortlessly that you doubt your own eyes. But you know what they say about instincts. They don't lie. It started with an invitation. Jessica had a company event, one of those high-profile corporate parties that her firm put on a few times a year. Usually, she never asked me to come. Said it was just work stuff and boring. But this time, she insisted. Practically dragged me there. Told me it would be good for appearances. That phrase stuck with me. Good for appearances. I didn't know it then, but my presence that night wasn't about me. It was about control. About hiding something in plain sight. We arrived at the venue. Some overpriced rooftop bar overlooking the city. The kind of place where people laugh too loudly at bad jokes and sip cocktails that cost more than a full meal. Jessica walked in like she owned the place, her arm loosely hooked through mine. But something was off. Not in the way she looked. She looked stunning. Red dress, flawless makeup, that confident smile she wore like armor. No, it was the way she kept glancing across the room, searching for someone. I followed her gaze, and there he was, Daniel, her boss, a man I instinctively disliked the second I met him. Too smooth, too quick with a smirk. He was surrounded by his employees, talking, laughing, drinking like he was the king of the world. But the moment Jessica and I stepped in, his eyes locked onto her. Not me, her. Jessica squeezed my arm, forcing a smile. Come on, let's get a drink. I let her drag me toward the bar, but my mind was already working overtime. The way she straightened her back, the way she suddenly became too affectionate, the way she kept checking her reflection in the mirrored walls, this wasn't just another work event. Something was happening. I played along, smiled, nodded at her coworkers, made polite conversation. But every now and then I caught her exchanging glances with Daniel. Quick, hidden moments. A flicker of something between them. Something I wasn't supposed to see. And then it happened. Jessica excused herself to freshen up. Except she didn't go to the restroom. She went straight to him. I moved before I even realized what I was doing. Wove through the crowd, keeping a careful distance. Watching. Studying. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I saw her lean in close to Daniel, whisper something in his ear. His lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. His hand brushed her waist, quick but deliberate. Like it wasn't the first time. Like he had done it before. She laughed at something he said. Not the polite, casual laugh she used at work. A real laugh. A laugh I hadn't heard in months. Something inside me snapped. I took a step forward, but before I could reach them, Jessica turned like she felt me there. For a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and I saw it. Panic. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. She straightened, flipping her hair over her shoulder, and her expression morphed into something else. Amusement. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She was mocking me. And that's when she did the unthinkable. She laughed. Loud enough for others to hear. Loud enough to turn heads. And then, in front of her colleagues, her boss, and half the damn company, she turned to Daniel and said, God, my husband gets so insecure sometimes. It's embarrassing. The room froze. People turned. Conversations died. The air shifted. Jessica just stood there, waiting, daring me to react. And for the first time in my life, I lost control. Something in me broke at that moment. The way she said it, like I was some pathetic, jealous idiot throwing a tantrum in public. Like I was an inconvenience. I felt every eye in the room shift toward me, waiting for my reaction. Some amused, some curious, and some Daniel's especially smug. Jessica, my wife, had just publicly humiliated me. And she did it on purpose. My body went cold. My hands curled into fists at my sides, but I forced them open. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my breathing shallow. Every instinct screamed at me to lash out, to say something, do something, but I knew that's exactly what she wanted. She wanted to push me into looking like the insecure, angry husband. To paint herself as the sophisticated, charming woman with the overly emotional partner. And Daniel? He was eating it up. He leaned back against the bar, sipping his drink, eyes flicking between us like he was watching a show written just for him. The bastard was enjoying this. I had two options. One, I could walk away, pretend I didn't care, let them win. Or two, I could make her regret it. I stepped forward, forcing a slow, easy smile onto my face. My heart was still hammering, but I didn't let it show. If she wanted to play games, I'd play. Embarrassing, I repeated, keeping my voice calm, controlled. I let the word hang in the air, letting the audience feel it. Jessica, I didn't realize you considered your husband embarrassing. Jessica blinked, just for a second. She hadn't expected me to stay composed. That tiny flicker of hesitation told me everything. Daniel, still watching, smirked. Come on, man. We're just joking around. I shifted my gaze to him. Oh, are we? I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. Funny, because I don't recall laughing. Daniel's smirk faltered. Jessica, sensing the tension shift, quickly placed a hand on my arm. Fake affection. I knew that move. Damage control. Babe, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. A joke. Right? A joke she made at my expense in front of her entire company. A joke meant to make me look small while making her and Daniel look like they were above me. I turned my attention fully to her now, letting the silence stretch. Watching as she shifted under my gaze. For the first time tonight, she was uncomfortable. You know what's actually embarrassing, Jessica? I said, voice still smooth, still controlled, but sharp as a blade. Standing in a room full of people while your own wife disrespects you. That's embarrassing. The air went dead silent. Jessica's face froze. Her fingers twitched on my arm before she quickly pulled them back. The flicker of panic was back in her eyes. I could have left it at that. Could have walked away, knowing I'd put the seed of doubt in everyone's mind. But I wasn't done. I turned to Daniel, who was gripping his glass a little tighter now. And you? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. You really think I don't see what's going on? Daniel tilted his head, still trying to play it cool. What are you talking about? I stepped closer, just a fraction. Enough to make him feel it. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Jessica's breath hitched. She knew this was spiraling. I glanced back at her, lowering my voice just enough so that only she could hear. You might want to choose your next words very carefully, Jess. Because when we leave this party, we're going to have a very interesting conversation. For the first time that night, I saw real fear in her eyes. And just like that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving her standing there, speechless. The car ride home was silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence. The kind that hums with unsaid words, with tension so thick it could choke you. Jessica sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, her nails digging into her own skin. She was waiting for me to break first, to explode, to yell, to give her something she could twist back on me. I didn't. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, my jaw locked, my eyes on the road. My mind was a war zone. Flashes of the night replayed over and over. The way Daniel's hand had grazed her waist, the way she had laughed, the way she had mocked me in front of her entire company. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to demand the truth, to force her to admit it. But I didn't want her lies. I wanted her to break. Jessica shifted in her seat, exhaling sharply. A deliberate move. She wanted me to acknowledge her first. When I didn't, she scoffed under her breath. Oh, so now you're giving me the silent treatment? Real mature. I still didn't speak. She let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. God, you're so predictable. You act all high and mighty, but the moment I make a joke, I slammed the brakes. Not hard enough to be reckless, just enough to send a message. The car jerked to a stop at the red light, and Jessica lurched forward slightly before catching herself. Jesus, what the hell? She snapped, whipping her head toward me. Slowly, I turned to her. My voice was dead calm. That wasn't a joke, Jessica. Her mouth opened, then closed. She knew exactly what I meant. I let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of my words. When she said nothing, I pressed on. You embarrassed me in front of your entire company. You laughed at me, Jessica. In front of him. She blinked. A flicker of something crossed her face. Guilt? No, Jessica didn't do guilt. It was something else. Annoyance. Like I was inconveniencing her. Oh my God! She groaned, rubbing her temples. Are you seriously still on about that? You're overreacting. I gritted my teeth. Overreacting. Yes. She threw her hands up. I was just messing around. Okay? It was lighthearted. It's not my fault if you're too sensitive to handle a little teasing. Teasing. That word set me off more than anything else. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head with a dry chuckle. Wow. You really think I'm stupid, don't you? Jessica's jaw tensed. I never said that. You didn't have to. I met her gaze, my voice steady but razor sharp. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way he looked at you. Her eyes flickered. A tiny flash of panic, so fast most people wouldn't have caught it. But I did. She recovered quickly, rolling her eyes. Oh my God, not this again. You're being ridiculous. Do you seriously think there's something going on between me and Daniel? You're delusional. I just stared at her. Studied her. She was good. Too good. The perfect liar. If I didn't already know, I might have believed her. But I wasn't falling for it. I leaned back against the seat, tilting my head slightly. You know what's funny, Jessica? You're not even denying it. Silence. She swallowed. I just did. No, I smiled. Cold. Sharp. You called me delusional. You said I was overreacting. But you didn't deny it. Jessica stiffened. Just a little. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. The light turned green, but I didn't move. I watched her, my pulse hammering in my ears, waiting. For a second, I thought she might finally break. That she might let the mask slip. That I might see the real Jessica underneath all that charm and manipulation. And then she laughed. Not the kind of laugh you'd expect from someone caught in a lie. Not nervous. Not guilty. Amused. Like this was all a game to her. Wow, she breathed, shaking her head. You really are paranoid. And just like that, she turned her head toward the window, dismissing me. Dismissing the entire conversation. Like it wasn't worth her time. My grip on the wheel tightened. The anger I had been holding back, controlling, was starting to fray at the edges. Jessica thought she had won. She thought she had beaten me. She had no idea what was coming next. The rest of the drive home was silent. Not because the argument had ended, but because I had stopped playing her game. I could feel Jessica watching me out of the corner of her eye, waiting for me to snap, waiting for me to give her something to work with, but I didn't. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, my breathing controlled, my face unreadable. If she wanted me to break, she would have to try harder. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the tension in the car was suffocating. Jessica didn't even wait for me to kill the engine. She just unbuckled her seatbelt and slammed the door shut behind her, storming into the house like she was the victim, like I was the one who had embarrassed her. I took my time getting out. I didn't follow her immediately. I needed a second to breathe, to calm the storm raging inside me. I stood there in the driveway, staring at the front door, my fists clenched at my sides. I knew that if I walked in there now, she'd twist everything. She'd start yelling, throw out accusations, make herself the wounded party. And if I wasn't careful, I'd end up on the defensive. And I refused to let that happen. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders, then finally stepped inside. Jessica was waiting for me in the living room. Arms crossed, eyes blazing. She had already kicked off her heels, tossed her purse onto the couch, and poured herself a glass of wine, all within the 2 minutes it took me to walk inside. Are we really doing this? She asked, voice laced with irritation. I shut the door behind me. Doing what? She scoffed. The whole dramatic silent treatment thing. Jesus, you act like I cheated on you. I stilled. She caught it. A flicker of something crossed her face, realization. She had said too much. I tilted my head. Slowly, letting the silence stretch. Watching as her fingers tightened around the wine glass. I took a step forward. Interesting choice of words. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh my God, not this again. I ignored that. You sound nervous, Jess. She laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Yeah, because you're being a psycho right now. I smiled. Cold. Controlled. Am I? Jessica's jaw clenched. She hated when she couldn't get a reaction out of me. I walked past her, straight to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. I took my time, letting the tension sit, letting her stew in it. She was waiting for me to explode. I wouldn't. I turned back to her, sipping my water. Tell me something, Jess. She exhaled sharply, already exasperated. What? How long has it been going on? Jessica flinched. Barely. A microsecond. But I saw it. Her shoulders squared. How long has what been going on? I set my glass down on the counter. You and Daniel. Silence. Jessica blinked. You're insane. I smiled again. You didn't say no. She let out a frustrated laugh, throwing her hands up. Are you even hearing yourself right now? You're acting like a crazy person. I nodded. Maybe. But let's test something, shall we? I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked it, turned the screen toward her, and pressed play. Jessica's face drained of color. The video wasn't long, 30 seconds, but that was all I needed. The footage? Jessica, at the party, with Daniel. The exact moment when she leaned in too close, when his hand lingered on her waist, when she whispered something into his ear that made him smile like he owned her. Her breath hitched. Where did you get that? I shrugged. Phones have cameras, Jess. And people love to record things. Especially at parties. Her hands curled into fists. You had someone spy on me? I laughed. Actually laughed. Spy? You humiliated me in a room full of people, Jessica. You put on a show. I just happened to have a copy of it. Her nostrils flared. She was scrambling, desperate to regain control. This doesn't prove anything. I raised an eyebrow. Doesn't it? Her lips parted, then closed. For the first time all night, she was speechless. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You have one chance to tell me the truth, Jessica. One. If you lie to me again, I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'll make sure everyone sees this. Her breathing was uneven now. I could see it, the panic. The real, genuine fear. I leaned in, close enough that she couldn't look away. So tell me, Jess, I whispered. How long? Jessica's face went rigid. The confident, smug woman from earlier was gone, and in her place was something else, something raw. I could see her mind working, calculating, searching for an angle. If I had learned anything from being married to Jessica, it was that she never admitted defeat unless she had no other option. She wasn't going to break easily. I held her stare, waiting, letting the silence stretch. She had to feel it. The weight of the truth pressing down on her, the walls closing in. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't one of her games. That I wasn't the same idiot she had been stringing along for months. And then, finally, she exhaled. Slow, shaky. She reached for the wine glass on the table, took a sip, then set it down carefully. When she spoke, her voice was measured. You're being dramatic. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insulting. Even now, with evidence in her face, she was trying to gaslight me. Try again. I stepped closer. Not aggressive, not threatening, just unwavering. Jessica looked away, pressing her lips together. Her nails tapped against the glass. I could see her working through her options. Finally, she sighed. Fine. She met my eyes. You really want the truth? I said nothing, just waited. She shrugged. It was just flirting. A muscle in my jaw twitched. Flirting. She nodded. That's it. I tilted my head, studying her. So if I check your phone right now, I won't find anything else? Jessica tensed. There it was. I'm not giving you my phone. Her voice was sharper now. Defensive. I nodded. That's what I thought. She let out an annoyed scoff, crossing her arms. Oh my God. Do you even hear yourself? You sound like some crazy, jealous husband. What's next? Are you going to follow me to work? Check my emails? Put a tracker on my car. I smiled. Would I find something if I did? Her mouth snapped shut. For the first time, she was cornered. I leaned back against the counter, watching her. You know, Jess, I've spent the last few months feeling like I was the problem. Like I was going crazy. You were so damn good at making me doubt myself. Making me think I was just overthinking things. I exhaled, shaking my head. But the truth is, you're just a liar. Jessica's face hardened. Excuse me? I pushed off the counter. You heard me. Her jaw clenched. You know what? Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I've been talking to Daniel. And yes, it's been a little flirty. She threw up her hands. But it's not like I slept with him. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I let her keep talking. Because that's what Jessica did. She talked herself into deeper holes. I mean, come on, she continued, voice dripping with frustration. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to be with someone who's always so serious? You never want to go out, you never do anything exciting, and then you act all surprised when I find someone who actually makes me feel alive. I blinked. Ah, there it was. The shift. The attempt to flip the blame. Jessica had spent years perfecting this move. Whenever she was caught doing something wrong, she would pivot, turn it around, make herself the victim, make it seem like I had pushed her into her bad decisions. Not this time. I exhaled, nodding slowly. So, just to be clear, this is my fault? Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh my God, don't twist my words, I'm not twisting anything. I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying that you let another man put his hands on you because I don't make you feel alive? Jessica opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. Checkmate. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers tightening around her arms. She looked like she wanted to scream. Like she wanted to lash out. But she couldn't. Not when I had just thrown her own logic back in her face. For the first time in our marriage, she had nowhere to run. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You should have just told me the truth from the beginning, Jess. Jessica's breath hitched. And then something shifted in her eyes. Something cold. She took a slow step forward, closing the space between us, tilting her head slightly. And what would you have done, Her voice was smooth now, too smooth. Left me? Walked out? Please. You wouldn't. You can't. I frowned. What the hell does that mean? Jessica smirked. You need me. Without me, you're nothing. You'd be miserable, lost, completely. I laughed. Jessica flinched. I wasn't supposed to laugh. I was supposed to get angry. I was supposed to feel trapped. That's what Jessica wanted. That's what she counted on. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. And then, right in front of her, I opened my messages and hit send. Jessica's smirk vanished. What did you just do? She asked, voice sharp. I smiled. You'll see. She lunged for my phone, but I stepped back easily. Who did you text? She demanded. I took a sip of my water, enjoying the way she was finally panicking. Don't worry, Jess, I said casually. You'll find out soon enough. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Jessica was the one who looked afraid. Jessica's face dropped. Her breathing was uneven now, her hands curled into tight fists. Who the hell did you text? I took my time. Enjoyed the shift in power. For the first time since this nightmare began, she was the one scrambling. She was the one on edge. I finally had what she never wanted me to have: control. I slid my phone back into my pocket, giving her a calm, almost amused look. Why do you care? Jessica's nostrils flared. Don't play with me. My name. I smirked. Oh, but it's fine when you play with me, huh? She lunged forward, trying to grab at my pocket. But I stepped back easily, watching as she nearly stumbled. She was desperate. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Tell me who you texted, she demanded again, her voice sharp, high-strung. I tilted my head. Why? You nervous? Jessica opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head with a bitter laugh. Oh my God, you're such a child. You're seriously pulling this high school crap? What, you texted one of your little friends? Told them your wife was being mean to you? I exhaled through my nose. There it was. The last desperate attempt to belittle me, to try and make me feel small. I let her words sit in the air for a moment. Let her think she still had some control left. Then, I pulled out my phone again. And this time I turned the screen toward her. Her whole body stiffened. Jessica's eyes locked onto the name on the screen, her boss's boss. The CEO of her company. The one person Daniel answered to. The one person she answered to. And the message? A video. The video. The one of her and Daniel at the party. The inappropriate closeness. The whispering. The way he touched her waist like he owned her. Her face went white. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, you didn't. I smiled. I did. Jessica lunged. This time with real panic, real anger, trying to snatch my phone away. But I was faster. I slipped it back into my pocket before she could get close. She was breathing hard now. Hands trembling. You were such a petty little bastard. I shrugged. Maybe. Her lips parted like she wanted to scream. Instead, she clenched her jaw, hands shaking as she pointed a finger at me. You have no idea what you just did. None. I just stared at her. Oh, I know exactly what I did. Jessica blinked rapidly, her entire body buzzing with rage, with panic. Her breathing was unsteady, her mind racing. You don't understand. She stopped herself, realizing she was about to say too much. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. This could what, Jess? Her throat bobbed. This could expose you? I asked, voice calm. This could get you fired? Jessica didn't answer. But she didn't have to. Because I knew. This wasn't just some harmless flirting. This wasn't just an innocent mistake. Jessica and Daniel had been playing a very dangerous game, and now the consequences were closing in. I leaned in slightly, watching as she swallowed hard. You were so damn confident earlier. So sure that you had everything under control. But now. I smirked. Now you're scared. Jessica's breathing was ragged. She was unraveling. And then she did something I didn't expect. Her entire body suddenly deflated. The anger melted from her face, replaced by something else. Something softer. She sighed, shaking her head slowly. "I didn't want it to be like this," she murmured. I frowned. "Like what?" Jessica ran a hand through her hair, exhaling shakily. And when she looked up at me again, her eyes were glassy, wet, like she was about to cry. And for the first time that night, I hesitated. Because this was different. The anger, the defensiveness, that was expected. But Jessica crying? Looking genuinely regretful? That was new. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I clenched my jaw. "Bullshit." She winced like my words actually cut her. She turned away, biting her lip, wrapping her arms around herself like she was falling apart. I watched her carefully, suspicion creeping in. Jessica was a liar, a manipulator. But what if, just this once, she was actually telling the truth? She sniffed, wiping at her eyes. "I was unhappy, okay? I felt like we were just going through the motions. Like you didn't even see me anymore. And then Daniel, he made me feel like I mattered." She let out a shaky breath, turning back to me with those wide, teary eyes. "I know I messed up. I know I was wrong. But please, don't do this." She reached out, touched my arm. And for a second, just a second, I felt it. The old pull. The instinct to protect her. Because this was my wife. The woman I had built a life with. The woman I had promised to stand by, no matter what. But then I remembered. I remembered the laughter at the party. The way she mocked me in front of her coworkers. The way she had dismissed me as embarrassing. The way she had spent the last few months making me feel like I was crazy. And just like that, the hesitation was gone. I stepped back, out of her reach. Jessica's breath hitched. I met her gaze, my voice cold. "You're good, Jess. Really good. But you can't fake your way out of this one." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She knew. She knew she had lost. And for the first time in her life, Jessica had no idea what to do next. Jessica stood there, frozen. For the first time since this whole thing started, she wasn't talking. She wasn't spinning some excuse, some half-baked lie meant to buy her time. She had nothing. And it was killing her. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched, the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard, scrambling for something, anything, to say. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until finally she let out a slow, shaky breath. Her eyes darted to my pocket. "You haven't sent the video yet," she said carefully. I raised an eyebrow. She licked her lips. "You said you sent it, but I know you. You wouldn't do that without warning me first." She was gambling. Taking a wild shot in the dark, hoping she was right. Because if she was wrong, if I really had sent it, then her entire world was about to come crashing down. I tilted my head, keeping my expression unreadable. And what if I did? Jessica inhaled sharply, her whole body tensing. I stepped closer, watching as she instinctively shrank back. "Tell me, Jess, what happens if your boss sees that video? If Daniel's boss sees it?" I let the question settle. "Because I'm guessing this isn't just a harmless little crush, is it?" She said nothing. So I kept going. "If it was just flirting, you wouldn't be this scared. If it was just harmless fun, you wouldn't be begging me not to do this." Jessica's breathing was shallow now. She was trapped. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "So tell me, Jess, what's really at stake here?" Her lips parted, but she hesitated. I could see the internal battle raging inside her. If she lied, I'd see right through it. If she told the truth, she had no idea what I'd do with it. I waited. And then, finally, she exhaled. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I could lose everything. There it was. The truth. I stepped back, nodding slowly. "And Daniel?" Jessica flinched. She didn't want to answer that. I tilted my head. "Did he promise you something?" She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I didn't smile. "No. I just want to know how deep this goes." Jessica let out another shaky breath, rubbing her temples. When she spoke, her voice was laced with frustration. "He told me he'd get me promoted." I felt my stomach turn. "So it wasn't just flirting." She shook her head quickly. "No, I mean yes, but not in the way you think." I clenched my jaw. "Then explain it to me, Jess. Because right now, it sounds like you were sleeping with your boss to get ahead." Jessica's face twisted in anger. "I never slept with him." "Then what?" I challenged. "What did you do?" Her nostrils flared. "I let him think it was going to happen." I inhaled sharply. Jessica looked away. like she couldn't even face what she had just admitted. I stared at her, feeling something in my chest snap. The woman in front of me, the one who had once been my partner, my wife, was unrecognizable. She had spent months leading this man on, playing him, using him. And for what? A promotion? A better job title? And all the while, she had treated me like the fool. I ran a hand over my face, letting out a dry, humorless laugh. Wow. Jessica's gaze snapped back to mine, her expression defensive. It's not like that. I let out another bitter chuckle. Then tell me what it's like, Jess. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. She clenched her jaw. I did what I had to do. I froze. Jessica realized her mistake the second the words left her mouth. Her eyes widened slightly, but it was too late. I felt something inside me turn ice cold. I stared at her for a long moment. You did what you had to do? I repeated slowly. Jessica swallowed. I just meant, but I didn't let her finish. I took a step forward, my voice calm but razor sharp. Let me ask you something, Jess. If I hadn't caught you tonight, if I hadn't seen the way you looked at him, if I hadn't gotten that video, would you have stopped? Silence. Jessica opened her mouth, closed it, and that was my answer. I let out a slow breath, stepping back. My mind was racing, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't just about cheating. It wasn't just about Daniel. This was about who Jessica was. And she wasn't the person I thought I married. I looked at her one last time, memorizing her face, the way her expression flickered between panic and defiance. And then I did something she didn't expect. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and deleted the message. Jessica let out a sharp breath, relief flooding her face. Oh my God, she whispered. I thank you. I put my phone away, my expression unreadable. I didn't do it for you. Her smile faded. I turned toward the stairs, my movements slow, deliberate. I could feel Jessica's eyes burning into my back, waiting for me to say something. To yell. To fight. But I didn't. Because I had already made my decision. Jessica didn't know it yet. But this marriage was over. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything settle on my chest like a boulder. Jessica was next to me, turned away, her breathing slow and even. Whether she was actually asleep or just pretending, I didn't know, didn't care. It didn't matter anymore. The marriage was done. I had spent months questioning myself, doubting my own instincts, letting Jessica twist reality into something that suited her. And for what? To protect a relationship that, in hindsight, had been rotting from the inside out? No, I was done playing the fool. By the time the first hints of morning light bled through the curtains, my decision was final. I was leaving, not in a dramatic way, not with some screaming match or broken dishes or thrown-out suitcases. No, Jessica didn't deserve that kind of energy from me. She wasn't worth it. So instead, I did the opposite. I got up, took a shower, got dressed, and then I packed. I moved quietly, efficiently, only taking what I needed. Essentials, clothes, documents. I wasn't going to fight her over the house, over furniture, over things. Let her keep them. Let her have everything. Because at the end of the day, I was taking the only thing that actually mattered. My freedom. I had just finished zipping up my duffel bag when I heard movement behind me. Jessica. She was sitting up now, hair a mess, eyes puffy from what I assumed had been a night of restless sleep. Her gaze flickered to the bag, then to me. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a hoarse voice, she asked, "Where are you going?" I didn't answer right away, just finished zipping the bag, slung it over my shoulder, then finally turned to face her. Leaving. Jessica blinked. What? I exhaled, adjusting the strap on my shoulder. I'm done, Jess. She let out a small, disbelieving laugh, running a hand through her hair. No, you're not. I said nothing. Her laugh faded. Jessica's expression hardened. You're just trying to prove a point. You'll go stay at a hotel for a few days, cool off, and then you'll come back. She crossed her arms. We both know that. I studied her. The way she spoke so certainly. Like she had already decided my actions for me. Like she was so sure that I was still the same man she had spent years manipulating. I tilted my head. That's the thing, Jess. I stepped closer, just enough to watch her shift uncomfortably. You don't know me at all. Jessica's breath hitched. I didn't wait for a response. Didn't care to hear whatever last-minute excuse or justification she was about to pull from thin air. I just turned around and walked out. She didn't chase me. Didn't scream or beg or throw things. Because deep down she knew. This time she had pushed too far. And I wasn't coming back. The air outside felt different, crisper, lighter. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away from an argument just to cool off. I wasn't storming out, waiting for Jessica to call me back in, to reel me back into whatever twisted reality she wanted to spin this time. This was final. I walked to my car, threw my bag into the passenger seat, and slid in behind the wheel. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, breathing. Jessica was inside that house, alone, probably still sitting in bed, waiting for me to walk back through that door, waiting for me to crack. She didn't believe it. Not yet. She thought I was making some dramatic exit, that I'd come back in a few days calmer, willing to talk. That's how it had always worked before. Jessica pushed, I snapped, I left. Then I came back, and she convinced me it wasn't a big deal. But she didn't understand what had changed. This wasn't about Daniel. Not entirely. Daniel was just the wake-up call. The final, undeniable proof that Jessica wasn't just a bad wife, she was a bad person. For years, she had made me feel small. She had chipped away at me little by little until I barely recognized myself. The way she mocked me at that party? That wasn't new. That was just who she was. And I had let it happen. I had given her every opportunity to be better. To be honest. To be a decent human being. And she had spit in my face. There was nothing left to save. I exhaled slowly, then finally turned the key in the ignition. The engine hummed to life, smooth and steady. I put the car in reverse. As I backed out of the driveway, I allowed myself one last glance at the house. The house we had built together. The house where I had once imagined a future with her. Yeah? It was just a place. Just 4 walls and a roof filled with broken promises and wasted years. I pulled onto the street, not looking back again. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city passing by in a blur. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to keep moving. The silence in the car felt different than it had last night. It wasn't suffocating. It wasn't heavy with anger and resentment. It was freeing. I was free. At a red light, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. Jessica. I ignored it. A minute later, another text. Then another. Then a call. I let it ring. Then, slowly, I reached over and turned my phone off. I smiled to myself. Jessica had spent years thinking she held all the power, that she could push and pull me however she wanted. She had no idea what it felt like to be ignored. But she was about to find out. By the time I stopped driving, the sun was fully up, casting long golden streaks across the pavement. I pulled into an empty parking lot near a small coffee shop, cutting the engine and exhaling deeply. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It wasn't heavy. I sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield, letting reality settle in. I had left my wife. I had walked out of that house and meant it. Jessica's calls had stopped about 30 minutes ago. Maybe she finally got the message. Or maybe she was gearing up for something bigger. A grand apology. A desperate attempt to undo this. But it didn't matter anymore. I grabbed my phone and turned it back on. The screen flooded with notifications, calls, texts, even a few emails. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I already knew exactly what they would say. Where are you? Come home so we can talk. Are you seriously doing this? Be an adult. I scrolled past them, uninterested. Same tricks, different day. Jessica still thought this was a phase that I just needed to cool off before she could manipulate her way back into my head. She had no idea. I tapped on my contacts, scrolled down, and hit one name. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice picked up. Dude? It was Ryan, my best friend. The guy who had seen this coming long before I had. I exhaled, leaning back in my seat. I left. There was silence on the other end. And then relief. No. Wait. Yeah. Like, for real. For real. A deep chuckle. Holy shit. I was starting to think you'd stay in that mess forever. I laughed, rubbing a hand over my face. Yeah, me too. Ryan paused for a second. Then his tone shifted, softer. Genuine. How do you feel? I thought about it. Really thought about it. And then I answered honestly. Lighter. Ryan let out a slow breath. Good. You deserve that. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah. A pause. Then, so, where are you staying? You got a plan? I glanced around the empty lot, at the quiet little coffee shop with its flickering neon open sign. Not yet. Well, you do now. My guest room's open. Come crash here for as long as you need. I felt something tighten in my chest. Gratitude. Ryan had been telling me for months to get out, that I deserved better, that I wasn't crazy, no matter how much Jessica had tried to make me feel like I was. And now, here he was proving it. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, man. Anytime. I hung up, gripping the steering wheel for a second before finally shifting into gear. As I pulled out of the lot, I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. This was the start of something new, something real. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back.